This time, West Germany upset the New World Order in 1954.
And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more. And it's no, nay, never. No, nay, never, no more. 'Cause I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the seemingly impossible to rank teams and find out once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name is Graham Dunn. I desperately trying to crowbar Oxford United references in. And joining me as ever, very much the Norris McWhirter of the football world, it's Jamie Rooney.
Oh, we need to be careful. We really are showing our age. We get excited about Shaw Taylor, and now you bring in Norris McWhirter. And, we're just losing so many people right now, not just from an age point of view, but probably from our North American listeners as well. Who is Norris McWhirter? Guinness Book of Records. Look it up. It'll be on Wikipedia.
Very much so, and it just blows your mind if you look up his brother Ross McWhirter. That's an extraordinary story. But Jamie, you are very much our Norris on the spot this week, and that's partly, of course, because this is real. I think dedication to the cause, because a couple of weeks ago we were looking at the world's longest football game, and last week we started talking about the world's shortest game, and unbelievably, you've gone firsthand in the preceding days. You've gone firsthand to go and find the world's most northern football ground. And when we say northern, I assume we're not talking about Fred Truman Norman. We are northern. We are talking about north from a more geographic perspective.
Yeah, the most northernest football ground on the planet, playing professional football. Yeah, I'd like to say it was like a specific task that I kind of set out for this particular podcast we put together. It was more convenient. So I took a trip to Tromsø recently. I had a few days in the beautiful Arctic Circle, and I saw the Northern Lights. And I couldn't, as football fans as we are, I couldn't help but want to go to the nearest football ground. So I wandered up the hill in Tromsø. It's a town of around about 70,000 people. They have a professional football club. And I just wandered to the stadium thinking I'll only be on the outsides, on the periphery, and they welcomed me in. I met Tommy, the events manager there. Wonderful young man. He talked me through the history of Tromsø, the more recent history, his time in Manchester. They showed me around the ground. I was able to purchase a Northern Lights away kit from Tromsø as well, which I'm donning right now. A beautiful kit based on the Aurora Borealis. Let's just say the Northern Lights. And yeah, we reminisced about Tromsø's games, and I was able to get in with one because I remembered the Chelsea game of 1997 where Tromsø played Chelsea in the Cup Winners' Cup and famously beat them 3-2 in the glorious snow with the amazing orange football,
which was gloriously resurrected in the US Soccer League last week, which with to great comic effect. If you haven't seen footage from that genuinely was something from the mid-70s there. I expected to see sort of Keith Weller playing in those on those pitches as well. So this is quite impressive. The most northernmost. Obviously the next target, presumably this week, you're travelling to the most. Are you heading to, where would that be, Argentina or something like that?
Yeah, I think it might be Patagonia. I'm not sure though. That would be one that we'd need to check. But why not pop down to Patagonia? It's going to be summer down there at the moment, or coming into probably autumn, I would say. But why not? The things we do to keep this podcast interesting. I think.
I'm noticing. Obviously we were talking about Total Network Solutions last week, an extraordinary tale of sponsorship of the most brilliant sort. The shirt you have on there is adorned by multiple sponsors as we speak, but I think you've managed to find some even. I was talking about the Coventry City Talbot shirt, which kind of used the Talbot style Lego designed, I thought, very elegantly, although some people might think it was a bit gaudy, but I thought very elegantly. Actually, elegantly isn't the right word, but spectacularly into the design of the Coventry City home kit. And you found one or two who've maybe taken it even a step further.
In a similar vein of sponsorship taking a controlling interest in the appearance of the football team, there's a football, and this is one for Phil Craig when we get him on next. I think really he's our North East expert. So we're really going into North Yorkshire. I think here we're going to the village or the town of Bedale FC, who play I think in the North Riding League. They're sponsored by Heck. Now, Heck are a food manufacturer. I think they're quite well known. You can find their products in most supermarket chains. And their away kit, which is all done in a good cause because the money they raise, 25% goes to prostate cancer, which is fantastic. But their away kit is designed on the Heck products. So their away kit will be, kind of looks like a toad in the hole with sausages down the shirt.
Bang as a mash, I think it is.
It is bang as a mash, and the shorts in particular are very mash, especially when you look from behind. It's I don't know if it was a deliberate design or just a very coincidental design, but the way the sausage on the back of the plain shorts looks like maybe they have got a little bit excited or a little bit nervous before the game is kicked off.
There are a series of spectacular ones, as you say, all for good cause. We don't mind. The hot dog kit from the previous year is pretty spectacular as well, isn't it? We will share some pictures of this on the social as well, but it really is pretty special. Bring me back the days of Crown Paints and Hafania and JBC and so forth. But
and Wang.
Happy days. And Wang, of course. I'm glad we managed to get the Wang computers. Halcyon days of I think what we will do in a future episode is to probably try and build. Maybe we'll have a sponsor off or something. So I definitely think with each team there is. Well, all teams have had loads of sponsors across the years, but each team, I think there is one sponsor attached to them, and what I'm not quite sure is whether that they are basically whoever was sponsoring them in 1984, in my case, or whether there are others that have risen above this. But if you think Southampton, surely you think Draper Tools. But enough of such nonsense. Today we are going back to this is a great story, and it's one that Jamie is you're particularly well versed on, which is just as well as people will be able to tell. I don't have much voice left, which might mean a welcome break from the Oxford United interjections for many people. Although even 1954 World Cup, that's going to be a real stretch. Though I'll keep working on it. We are going back to the 1954 World Cup, and we're going back to this West Germany victory. I think what's probably extraordinary about it is, it's extraordinary for many, many reasons. Just that tournament itself, we'll talk quite a lot about that, which FIFA manages to find spectacular ways of making its tournaments and formats different and intriguing each time. And this is I think unquestionably the most bizarre one. Not even one that ever, even on paper, looked like it would work. But I think the most extraordinary thing about this story is that West Germany are underdogs, and given throughout our entire our football supporting lives, they have been the complete opposite. They have been very much the favourites, and as a result, we've generally celebrated in losing in tournaments in very as that does tend to be the way of favourites and champions. You like to see them fall apart, but this obviously you're looking at West Germany at a very, very different time in their formation. In fact, this is the first World Cup that they're able to enter, isn't it?
As West Germany, yes. So they've been to previous World Cups as Germany, a unified nation. The 50 World Cup, the 1950 World Cup that was held in Brazil, they were banned and they still were unable to take part in international football competitions. But by 1954, that ban had been lifted and they could once again take part, and they would take part as West Germany. And absolutely, yeah, Graham, they were not seen as a team that was going to win this football tournament. They certainly weren't the West Germany or the Germany that we're familiar with now, that gets to the latter stages of major tournaments pretty much all the time. Although in the last few years, they have been gloriously going out in group stages, which is very un-German. So hopefully they can sort that out for the Euros coming up in the next few months.
The echoes and similarities between West Germany or Germany and Manchester United at a domestic level for me are quite extraordinary. In the same way as I have come to enjoy Manchester United's failings to get back up to that level. It's quite similar with Germany. It is an incredible thing, and obviously this all stems from the war and the rebuilding of Germany and the partitioning of Germany over that period. And basically at that time you've got Germany, West Germany, it's not a professional game, is it?
No, it's an amateur game in Germany. It had been right up until the 1960s when the Bundesliga was formed and officially kicked off. But German football goes right back to the early 1900s, like most football in Europe. But in terms of organising themselves, they were regional leagues and they were amateurs. There's one key character in this whole story that plays a critical role right through from in the 1930s right through to Germany's triumph in 1954. And that's the coach, Sepp Herberger, who is probably one of the greatest football minds that's ever been in the game, certainly ahead of his time. And I think if West Germany didn't have Sepp Herberger in charge, which was a possibility after the Second World War, where he may not have continued as national team coach, then I don't think they would have gone on and been able to win the World Cup. I think his influence and his management of the team was absolutely fundamental to their success.
I mean, he was coach before the war, wasn't he?
Yeah, so he became coach in 1936. Otto Nert was the coach. Germany famously at the Olympic football in 1936, the German games in Berlin, lost to Norway, which I think is the only football match that Adolf Hitler ever attended and watched. But after that defeat, Otto Nerz was sacked. Herberger was already the assistant at that point, and he just assumed control of the football team. And that continued into the Second World War. And football continued in Germany in and during the Second World War, right through to the end of the war almost. I mean, it changed its shape slightly in around about 1943. Football was organised and it was being played on a regular basis. Herberger was keeping in touch with his players. He was arranging international games. And then when Germany came out of the war, obviously sanctions were in play. And when they were organising a national team, Herberger was considered the natural choice to be coach. But the German Football Federation, the president at the time, a guy called Pico Bauers, opened the application because of Herberger's links to being a member of the Nazi Party, and Germany was trying to cut a new image in the world. They didn't think it was appropriate for Herberger, a former member of the Nazi Party, to be the national coach. Herberger himself felt he was the obvious candidate, and in reality, he was the obvious candidate. And the long and the short of it is that Herberger did re-become the national team coach of West Germany then, shortly after the Second World War.
And football then sort of presumably restarts after the war in Germany?
Yes and no. So for those who are familiar with Germany, West Germany after the Second World War, it was split into controlled zones. So Britain controlled a zone, France controlled a zone, the Soviet Union controlled a zone, which then became East Germany, and the United States controlled a zone. So it was down to those particular nations and their zones in terms of what they allowed within Germany or West Germany at that particular moment. The British and the French were very strict. They didn't allow for organized sport in the early years. The Soviet Union decided that they wanted to set up socialist sports organizations and control in terms of how athletes were being utilized in sporting organizations. The USA didn't really care. Yeah, get on with football. I think the Germans were more horrified that they went back to their stadiums and they'd been converted into baseball pitches. And so they had to sort that out before they could start playing organized soccer again.
So a slow return to football, as you mentioned, West Germany, along with Japan, are barred from the 1950 World Cup. We come 1954, and we head to Switzerland, and West Germany do qualify, and we'll talk perhaps a bit more about the players and the squad that come in for that. But let's let's look at this format of the tournament. So, I mean, what I'd say in FIFA's defence is, 16 is a difficult number. There's not like an obvious way of forming any kind of tournament out of 16 that might easily. I mean, I suppose you could either just have a knockout competition, 4 rounds of that, or maybe just have 4 groups of 4. Everyone plays each other, top 2 go through. But that would be too simple, wouldn't it?
It's important to point out 1954 was the 5th edition of the World Cup. It's still a fairly early tournament, and you're coming out of the Second World War where countries are still finding themselves. Germany in particular, I mean, it's worth pointing out, economically it was broken going into the 1950s. There was widespread poverty. It was building itself. Rationing would have been in place, as it would have been in a lot of countries in Europe at that particular moment. But yeah, FIFA, I don't know. I can't understand some of their thinking sometimes. But yeah, you have 4 groups of 4. It's a fairly simple solution. But they come up with this scheme where they decide to have 2 seeded teams and 2 unseeded teams in each group. So 8 seeded teams.
Not controversial. Not controversial. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Again.
Yeah, absolutely not. But the group stages would each team would only play 2 games, and the seeded team would play the 2 unseeded teams, and obviously vice versa. So the idea was that the seeded teams should generally go through to the quarterfinals, so you're maintaining the quality. And West Germany going into this tournament were an unseeded team. They weren't one of the 8 seeds, and they were in a group with South Korea in their very first World Cup, with Hungary, who were very much the favourites to win this particular football tournament. And we can talk about the reasons why Hungary were the favourites to win this football tournament a little bit further down the line. They were also in with Turkey. Now, Turkey were a seeded team, but they weren't a seeded team because of their qualities. It was a default.
Yeah, absolutely, because aren't Spain meant to be the seeded team, but Turkey beat them in qualifying? Is that how they end up as a seeded team?
That's almost correct. So what FIFA have done, they've predetermined the seeds before any teams have qualified for the World Cup. I mean, you really are stacking your odds. And in fairness to FIFA, 7 of the teams, albeit Uruguay and Switzerland qualified by right, are there. So they've gambled a little bit. Turkey actually never beat Spain to qualify. It's quite bizarre. They beat Spain in one of the legs, and Spain won the other leg. Spain had by far a superior goal difference, but goal difference was not a determining factor at this particular moment in football to decide the outcome of who is the eventual winner. And there's no away goals and stuff like that. So they decide that Spain and Turkey need to have a replay. Now, the replay finishes at 2-2. So at that point, FIFA then, and this is something we've talked about before, decide to draw lots on who will go to Switzerland. It's a 50-50. I think a young boy with his eyes closed pulls out Turkey. Turkey goes to the World Cup finals, and FIFA in their infinite wisdom say, well, we'll just keep them as a seed then because they beat Spain, so they're obviously as good as Spain.
How little did they know? So you do end up in this that group then literally becomes a lottery, because you you basically end up with one genuinely seeded team in Hungary and 3 unseeded teams. So the South Koreans could feel pretty hard done by that. They're, having reached the World Cup, their first game should be against Hungary, whereas Turkey, who mysteriously avoid playing Hungary, a team who, as we all touched upon, highly impressive and are undefeated in 4 years. So probably a team to avoid if you can manage it. That tournament, as it starts, probably the biggest game of that group becomes the West Germany-Turkey game, doesn't it?
I think it's crucial, and I think Herberger knew this from the beginning. I think he's clearly done his homework. He realizes that West Germany, maybe he did think this, maybe he didn't, aren't going to beat Hungary in the group stage. So he's probably had a concession on that one already. He definitely feels that South Korea are going to lose to Hungary. So the crucial game is Turkey. West Germany have to win that game in order to stand a chance of qualifying for the next stage. And I think that's what Herberger's looking at that particular moment. I don't know if his mind is focused on getting to the final and winning the whole thing, but he's definitely focused on how can I get out of this group? And then it becomes, a one-off game in a knockout competition. And tactically, you can probably change your team. And Herberger does. He changes his team almost every game in order to fit the conditions of the fixture. Yeah, so the Turkey game's key for West Germany. They kick off on the 17th of June at 6:00. And after 2 minutes, Turkey go 1-0 up.
And actually, this does become something of a story of a theme of the tournament in West Germany. And there's a lot of resilience to this side.
Yeah, I think they have a belief. I don't know how much of that is bore out of the conditions that they're coming from. I mean, just to give you a context, these players, these West Germany players, many of them would have been in prisoner war camps. Many of them have been sent to the front lines. As much as Herberger protected them through the Second World War and making sure that they weren't sent to the front lines, so he had his players available for key games. By 1944, when Germany's losing the war, everyone has to go. They had that kind of, I think it was the 16-60 rule, where if you walk and you're male, then you have to fight for the motherland. So Herberger would have lost a lot of players. So a lot of these players are coming back. And just to give you one example of that, Fritz Walter, who is by far and away the standout player in this team. I mean, Max Morlock is a special player as well, but Fritz Walter is a special football player. He was a prisoner of war, and unlike some of his teammates who would have been prisoner of wars in English or French camps, who would have been sent back to Germany, if you were a prisoner of war of the Soviets, which Fritz Walter was, you were going to Siberia. But because he was known to the Hungarian soldiers at the time, and he'd been playing football with the Hungarian soldiers, they were able to single him out, and they put him in the football team, and they told the Soviet commanders that he was from Saarland and he wasn't German, and it kind of extradited him away from going to Serbia. And Fitzwater says that, that was probably the most important game of his life, because I don't think he would have been a World Cup winning captain had he not been spotted by his talents have been spotted by the Hungarian officers that pulled him out. It's a bit like in the Pianist. Do you remember that film with Adrian Brody? But just to kind of use the visual analogy, he's in the queue ready to go to Auschwitz, and one of the guards realizes that, oh my God, this is a genius musician. We can't be sending this guy there. And he pulls him out away from his family and slaps him around and kicks him away because he's saving his life. It's a Fritz Walter moment for Adrian Brody in that particular film.
And interestingly, you mentioned Saarland, which West Germany actually play in qualification, don't they?
They do. I mean, Saarland as a football nation only existed for a few years. It's a space between France and Germany, and I think has always been a debate whether it belongs to France or it belongs to Germany. And for a period of time, it had its own independence. And so Germany were in a group with Saarland and Norway, and Germany were able to beat Norway in the group stage. I don't think Adolf Hitler was available to make that one in 1953. And they also go on to beat Saarland, and they qualify for the finals.
So we'll get on to the first game, which West Germany play Hungary, which is there's an interesting tactic, I suppose, attached to that one. But I suppose the other curiosity of that FIFA also decided in their wisdom in this tournament was to slightly counterintuitively was to not to have draws, but to have extra time in the qualifying game.
It's another decision by FIFA that doesn't really make any sense. Yeah, you're right. FIFA decided if after 90 minutes the teams were level, they would play an additional 30 minutes, whereby if they were level at the end of that, it's a draw.
That is quite impressive. I suppose the other thing that comes out, there are a lot of goals in this tournament, aren't there?
The average goals per game in this World Cup is 5.4. Now, that's never going to be beaten in any World Cup ever. You get about 2.2, 2.3 in recent World Cups. Hungary themselves scored 27 goals. That's 2 group games. That's a quarterfinal, a semi-final, and a final. 27 goals in 5 games. That's an average of 5.4 goals per game.
I'm not sure what stage of the tournament it was, but there's Austria's 7-5 thriller against Switzerland as well, which I think is the most goals scored in any World Cup game.
Yeah, it is. And again, I don't think this is ever going to be in 12 goals in one game. It's incredible. And it's a quarterfinal. It's 5-4 at half time. So I've tried to rationalize why there were so many goals in this particular edition, as there were lots of goals being scored in the German Oberliga as well. And I kind of put it down to the potential that players just weren't fit. This is quite a hard and harsh times for Europe in particular. They've come through a very traumatic 6-year, 5-year war where pretty much every single country has been decimated to some level. So there's a massive rebuilding exercise going on. You've got rationing in play. I just think the players weren't fit as they had been and how they were going to be. And I think that just allowed the opportunity for higher goal scoring games because players just weren't in the same physical shape that they would have been under normal circumstances had things like rationing not been in play.
Yeah, that is quite logical, isn't it? That there's not you're not getting your supply of isotonic drinks at half time after 60 minutes and so forth. You can definitely see it would be taking a toll, and there are a crazy number of goals around that time.
As we'll find out probably towards the end of this particular episode, the German players were getting a supply of vitamin C.
It's definitely so. But the other thing that makes this West Germany story such an underdog tale, I mean, I think the position of West Germany, semi-pro, recovering from from the war and a divided nation and everything attached to that, is that the team they go on to beat in the final is arguably one of. I mean, here we are on a podcast talking about who's by far the greatest, and we're talking about a team that does really well by beating a team that is arguably by far the greatest, Hungary.
The glorious Magyars, the golden generation. It's for another episode, and I think we need a specialist on to help us with that one. But yeah, I mean, I think this is possibly the best football team that's ever existed in world history. And I may have said that about Ajax, but in terms of international side, FIFA have their rankings, and in terms of how they award points to teams to kind of give you a ranking in terms of who the best teams, which helps them when it comes to seeding tournaments, which makes sense. ELO rankings are also in play. They're kind of adopted from chess, but they're used in football. And because the internet's a wonderful thing, somebody has spent a huge volume of time going through the whole history of football to work out the ELO rankings of a particular time of a particular period. And Hungary are going into this World Cup are the world's number one team. They should be. They're unbeaten in almost 5 years. That's a run of 41 games. And they have the highest ELO rating of 2,232. It's a number that's ever been recorded. Hungary are absolutely smashing everyone. Famously, people in England will know that Hungary came to Wembley in 1953 and gave the English football team a lesson and beat them 6-3. The English at the time didn't see that as a lesson. I think there was a certain degree of arrogance in English football at that point, and they still believed that England was the best football team in the world. So they challenged a rematch. They went to Hungary and then they got beat 7-1. Hungary was smashing everyone. And just to kind of give you an idea, between 1950 and 1956, they played 62 games. They only lost one game in that run. It's a pretty significant game, but they only lost one game. They scored in those 62 games 264 goals, which is an average of 4.3 goals per game. They conceded 74. So we are talking about West Germany. We're not talking about Hungary. But to set the context, West Germany have a tall order on their hands. And they have to face Hungary in the group stage as well.
And what a challenge that is. I mean, you've got to face Hungary and you've got to face, of course, their star Puskas, who's an unbelievable striker. I suppose you can always hope that maybe, like Italy developed that reputation, there might be a bit of a slow starters to the World Cup. Might take them a while to find their feet. They scored just the 9 goals against Korea. They found the groove. So, what is a team of part-timers to do against this unbelievable side? Tactics seem to be, if I've understood it right, was just rest everyone, pick some random players, play people in different positions. Is that what happened?
I think that's what history tells us. I'm a little skeptical on this. A World Cup squad is a World Cup squad. You take 22 players and you're taking players where you've got a backup in every position. And absolutely Herberger will know his best team. But if you look at the lineups that Herberger employs during the World Cup, I think he changes it every single game. He's moving players around. He does make 7 changes for the Hungary game. And people have seen that as if he's playing a reserve team as opposed to his first team. But he brings in Rahm, and Rahm is a very important player, as we learned from the final. He's also stuck with Fritz Walter, and you've also got Werner Liebrich, who's very significant in terms of what his role is in this particular game against Hungary in that side. So, I think he's made some changes, without doubt. He's probably looked at the possibility that they're going to lose, and he's probably rested players thinking, okay, we'll play because they've beaten Turkey, and Turkey have beaten South Korea, and because FIFA got this ridiculous structure for a tournament, Germany are looking likely to go in to play Turkey again in a playoff to who goes through to the quarterfinals.
Yes, as you say, it's difficult to fully know how much was tactics. The result is a relatively, it shows no kind of echo of what is to come. They lose the game 8-3, but perhaps there is one significant thing that happens during that game in what happens to Puskas.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out. And again, there's some wonderful stuff on the internet, and the people have looked at this game and they've done win probability. Hungary, for this particular match, they won 8-3 against West Germany, had a win probability of 86.8%. Germany had a win probability of 4.8%. I think it's important to keep that in mind for when we get to the final, because we also have a win probability in the final as well that allows us to compare and contrast. But you're right. Puskas is probably at his glorious best. And if you read his autobiography that was written in the late 1950s, actually, it's been republished many times. He talks about that he's in the zone. He's playing the best football. He feels he's untouchable. And at half time, Herberger makes a change. So Werner Liebrich, who's a defender in Herberger's setup, tells Liebrich to mark Puskas. So there's no pictures of whether Werner Liebrich, his tackle off the ball on Puskas was deliberate or not. Puskas himself, he's quoted saying, "I think the guy was out to cripple me." And he didn't cripple him, but what he does do, he damages Puskas' ankle enough that puts him out for the rest of the tournament until the final, when he is declared fit.
And when we'll come on to that when we get there, of course, but there's no record of players not being fully match fit and being rushed back into crucial finals of any kind. So, yes, the slightly bizarre circumstances that West Germany beat Turkey, they lose to Hungary. The obvious thing would be for them to play South Korea and see, but no, what happens then is it's a rematch between Turkey and West Germany, which West Germany win. Again, having beaten them in the first game, they must be pretty confident of winning that. And in fact, out of the 4 groups, 2 of the groups end up going to a golden game. I don't know what they would have called it back then, a playoff game. And in both cases, the unseeded team comes out on top.
And then Germany go into a quarterfinal to face a pretty decent and much fancied Yugoslavia, where the win probability of that one was around about 50-50. It's really either team could win that one. And there's a special little guy playing for Yugoslavia, Graham.
So, who could it be? Someone who it is a you tipped me off before here, and it's a guy who actually ends up being something of a legend in German football.
An absolute legend in German football, a troubled man. He had his troubles with alcoholism. But yeah, we've covered him before. He was the coach of Kevin Keegan's Mighty Mouse Hamburg of the late 1970s, early 80s. Branko Zabic, a genius, an absolute genius coach, madman as well. The guy who was so drunk he missed the team bus to Dortmund and had to get a taxi. And then fell asleep on the bench when he was in charge of Hamburg, as we've recalled previously on one of these versions. But yeah, he was actually in the Yugoslavian team facing up against West Germany on that day, winning his 25th cap, as they were called back then, for Yugoslavia.
Yes, indeed. West Germany win that game 2-0, a very impressive result. I'm sort of drawn to the two of the other quarterfinals, really, in that tournament. That's when, of course, we have the fantastic Austria-Switzerland result. You've got to feel for the Swiss home nation in front of the home crowd. You score 5 goals, you're going to be pretty confident getting your way into the semi-finals, but 5 goals is not enough. And they end up going out, bowing out. The host nation is out, the quarterfinal stage. And then, I don't know anything about this game, because I think Hungary's path through is, I suppose they did really well in having no real seeded teams in their group, but they get Brazil, who aren't quite the force that they're to become yet, but they're obviously a decent side. And I don't know anything about this game other than I see that Wikipedia describes it as one of the most violent games in football history. So, do you know anything about this?
I do, and I kind of want to leave it as a cliffhanger until we kind of cover Hungary, because there's so much going on, and this really opens up the whole kind of can of worms. I mean, this is way better than people being offended that they received a handbag or a purse and then decide they want to play, like the Arsenal players did with the Lazio team that we covered a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, this is a violent football match. This is famously called the Battle of Bern, not the Miracle of Bern. This is the Battle of Bern, and there is a lot about this football match, and I think it's worth coming back to, hopefully in an episode where we do actually cover Hungary. But it is quite fascinating, and Puskas himself, Frank Puskas, in his book, has a whole chapter dedicated to this football match. But you're right, Hungary are facing Brazil, who are the 1950s runners-up, and then when they come through that Battle of Bern, when they get through the violence, which they do, they then go on and play the holders, Uruguay, who at this particular moment in the history of the game had never lost a World Cup game.
It's an impressive record, isn't it? So they had they got 2 wins by this stage? Had they only entered
they're
one?
2 wins, and they didn't go to 34 and they didn't go to 38, which are both in Europe. They won in 30, they won in 50, and they were unbeaten when they faced the glorious golden generation of Hungary in the World Cup semi-final in 1954.
I mean, perhaps a stat slightly flattered by only playing in South American tournaments that would help, but it's still quite something. Once you got to the semi-final and you're unbeaten, you would, in all World Cup games, you must sort of fancy your chances.
I think it's Hungary's tightest game. They're taken into extra time in the semi-final. Ideguti, Kostic and Seibel, the goal scorers, that because obviously Puskas is not playing, that see Hungary over the line and take them into the final, where they will meet Germany, who's navigated through Yugoslavia, beating them 2-0, West Germany. And then West Germany have absolutely destroyed Austria in the semi-final.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the thing that's I find so curious looking at it from afar. it doesn't feel like a team of underdogs. The underdog stories are usually about being well organised and drilled and difficult to break down and, riding their luck to some extent or another. It's rare, this is the semi-final of the World Cup and they win 6-1. It's absolutely crazy.
I think this is the thing, and this is why if you don't know anything about West Germany at this particular point, other than what you know in the modern day, and you look at the score lines, you think, West Germany, of course they're going to win through these games. But again, the win probability against Austria was around about 50-50. It wasn't as clean cut as the score line suggests, but they're solid. And I think, again, this is going back to Sepp Herberger, the coach. He's organised. He's also, whilst the Hungarians have brought a different style of football with the false nine, and Hudagute being the key architect in that football team with these incredible players buzzing around him. Herberger's in tune with this, and he's also playing players in slightly different positions, which at the time was a fairly new thing. Systems were generally set and players knew where players were going to be. And we're in the era of playing the WM formation. This is very much in the WM formation. It predates 4-4-2, but it's definitely moved on from the classic 2-3-5 shape. And players were generally used to seeing players playing positions. And, there was no media coverage. The only way you could learn about a team was actually watching them live. You needed to get somewhere to watch them live. And that's the only way you're going to learn about a team, its tactics and its players. Obviously now, in this day and age, we can see teams from anywhere in the world. I can go online on OneFootball and watch my new favourite team, Tromsø, anytime I want.
So we end up in the extraordinary thing, the final, which is held at Bern's childishly, amusingly named Wankdorf Stadium. I'm sure it's pronounced differently. And we have set up this battle of what becomes known as the Miracle of Bern. Not Bern, baby Bern, I just prefer that. As a side note to that, I was desperately hoping that FIFA's current president was playing in that tournament in some way, so I could have had Infantino. Bern, baby Bern, Gianno Infantino. But sadly he wasn't. So, but yes, so we go to the World Cup final, and it is Hungary v West Germany, and both stories kind of have these amazing narratives to them. The idea of Hungary, achieving what they should have really. This great team should really win a World Cup, and West Germany, this team that goes on to become a kind of a World Cup machine going forward. There's still no reason to think West Germany are going to win this game. They lost the qualifier 8-3. You could certainly argue that Hungary had a trickier run into the final, but I mean, there's not. You were talking about the prediction on this. I mean, how likely was a West Germany win?
So going into the final, and the win probability doesn't take into account the conditions on the day. So we talked about the incredible Austria 7, Switzerland 5 game. That was played in almost 40 degrees heat. I mean, absolutely sweltering conditions. By the time the final comes around, it's still humid. We are in a European summer, but it's been absolutely pouring down with rain. The pitch has turned into a bit of a bog, and there's some significance to that. So I don't think the win probability is taken into account the weather, but the win probability for Hungary to win is 86.4%, for Germany to win 5.1%, a draw is 8.4%. So I mean, 86%. If you're a gambling man, and I'm not a gambling man, even I would feel confident about laying a 50p on Hungary to win this game.
And I think Paddy Power would have been paying out after 10 minutes when Hungary go 2-0 up. Puskas scores. Puskas, who they rushed back and somehow managed to patch up sufficiently to play, and he scores already. And I think Hungary go 2 up inside the first 10 minutes or so.
They do. Yeah, and you're right about Puskas. So this is his first game back since Werner Liebrich had kind of put him out of the tournament temporarily. I mean, what's brilliant, because this is the first televised World Cup, and because we live in an era where we can just get hold of anything, really, you can watch this game on YouTube. Now, the full game isn't available, clearly, because obviously it would have been film. that would have been recording this, and you have to change film, and the cameras weren't like the cameras we're used to these days. There were probably, I think, 2 or 3 cameras positioned around the ground, or they were moving the camera physically, which would have been a gigantic operation. So you can't watch the whole game, but you can watch lots of it. And Brian Glanville, brilliant football, world soccer writer, seems to have been around forever in terms of writing about World Cups. He mentioned in one of his World Cup books that Puskas didn't look like a man who was carrying an injury. You could read into the fact that he was put out early in the tournament, but I think Puskas is back, and maybe he's not 100%, but he's definitely not far from it. And you're right, after just a couple of minutes, that incredible left foot of his has put one up. And then an uncharacteristic error from Werner Kohlmeiner puts his goalkeeper, Tony Turek, in a bit of bother, and the ball spills, and then Seabor is able to just take an easy tap in. And you're right. Paddy Power, 10 minutes into the game, that's it. West Germany have got no chance. They're 2-0 down. This tournament is going the way we expected. What's the point of continuing? Just give the Hungarians the jewels, remain now.
Nobody had factored in the weather. There is a specific reason, isn't there, why the wet pitch, the rain, why this gives Germany something of an advantage?
Yes, it's sat on the bench next to Sepp Herberger, which you can see in television pictures, is a guy called Adolf Dassler. Now, Adolf Dassler was to change his Christian name to Adi shortly after the Second World War. For whatever reason, Adolf had stopped being a popular name. Yeah, it's quite bizarre as well, because if you try to look up the use of the name Adolf nowadays, I mean, it's a dead name. It's a bit like Terry, basically. No one's using it anymore. But next to Sepp Herberger is Adolf Dassler, Adi Dassler. Now, Adi Dassler, for those who don't know, and I'm sure most people know, is famous for setting up the organization, the shoe company, Adidas. Him and his brother Rudolf came from a family where their father was a cobbler, and I don't think he ever went to Northampton. And they then continued the family business, and they actually provided shoes to Jesse Owens, spikes. They were putting spikes, I think they were nails actually, in the 1936 Olympics. So Jesse Owens is running in a pair of early Adidas, or maybe Puma, depending on which side of the fence or side of the river he was leaning towards, because there's a bit of family history there, was wearing those spikes. And Adi Dassler had been supplying the kit for the West German team for a number of years, and he had come up with a concept for football boots where you could remove the studs and you could put different studs in to suit the conditions. And that's exactly what West Germany had done for this particular fixture.
Oh, it's innovation ahead of its time. It's a bit like having Craig Johnson on the bench next to you. So these studs they make a difference.
Again, I'm sceptical. I think, they probably do. Footwear is important in football, I guess. Footwear. I suppose it's going to make a difference, but it just feels more circumstantial. Maybe it is the sky cycling as it was under Sir Dave Brailsford, the kind of the marginal gains mentality, and that's what Germany are doing right now. But I struggle to find any concrete evidence other than circumstantial information that they made a difference. I haven't really seen anything from the players that suggested it made a big difference. But I guess if you're on a boggy pitch and you got longer studs, you are going to grip the surface probably a bit easier than if you had shorter studs. But regardless of whether it made a difference, it's just a brilliant story that Adidas was innovating and encouraging sports stars to reach for the stars in 1954.
Now, what probably makes more of a difference than the studs is the fact that having gone two down inside the opening minutes, West Germany equalised, get back on parity relatively quickly. They score actually their first goal in the 10th minute, and I think they're level by 20 minutes, aren't they? And that, I mean, you shouldn't be surprised that there have been 4 goals in the first 20 minutes of this game, because each game is averaging at least 5. That's a pretty free-scoring start to a World Cup final.
Yeah, Max Morlock, who I think would have been a player you'd have loved. I think he was a bit, from what I can understand, a bit of a wizard on the wide. Well liked, with a strong attitude, really good with the players, full of encouragement, full of opinion as well. He gets a goal back after 10 minutes. And then Helmut Rahn, who's already scored against Hungary in the previous game, he pops up at the back post and chucks one in, and it's 2-2 after 18 minutes.
And that's how it stays at half-time. In the second half, West Germany do eventually take a crucial lead with our man Rahn again.
Yeah, but there's a lot that happens between Rahn scoring in the 84th minute and the second half kicking off, because Hungary come out. I think one thing we should mention, and we can come back to it, is that the West German team most of the players, if not all the players, were administered a boost of vitamin C, as it was called back then, via the same syringe. So you've got this team doctor who's going around each player and giving them an actual boost. And I think we probably need to talk about what that potentially could have been. Regardless of that vitamin C boost, it's the Hungarians that come out on all cylinders firing. West Germany really do weather a storm for 15, 20 minutes. And in particular, the goalkeeper, Tony Turek, probably has the game of his life. He's 35 at the time as well, which is quite an age for a professional footballer in that particular period. He's making incredible saves. And when he's not able to save them, he's got his defender, Werner Kohlmeier, who's just absolutely the blocking king. He's getting his body in front of everything and blocking everything. And when those two aren't able to save West Germany, the woodwork, good old-fashioned woodwork, it's not called woodwork anymore, but it was woodwork back then, was saving the West Germans. So there's quite a storm going on the West German goalmouth. And the ploy probably was Hungary to win the game in the first 15 minutes of the second half, which they intend to do. But they're unable to break down this resilient West German and break down their very resilient wooden goalposts.
And exactly so. And so Rahn scores, this winning goal 6 minutes from the end. But even then, that's not the end of the controversies. There's Puskas thinks he's scored an equaliser 2 or 3 minutes from the end, only for that to be disallowed for an offside, I think. Highly controversial, though. Difficult to actually find any categorical evidence one way or the other.
Yeah, you can't see it. There are no TV pictures that really give you a clear view of whether Puskas was offside or not. William Ling, the Englishman's the referee. Sandy Griffiths is the linesman from Wales. Sandy Griffiths, brilliant name that is, from Wales. He flags. He says that Puskas is offside. But yeah, I think it's impossible to say. I can imagine it's a very emotional moment. It's a World Cup final. You've just gone 3-2 down against a team you were expected to beat. You've pulled one back and you see the officials are going to be disallowing it. So you're probably going to feel that you're aggrieved. You probably feel it was a goal. Puskas definitely felt that it was a legitimate goal.
So, I suppose what goes around West Germany. I mean, I can't imagine them getting on the wrong end of a decision in World Cup final within 12 years of that, perhaps, that nobody would. So, that just shows how things luck evens itself one way out or the other. There's no question at the end of that. Hungary, I assume they have their own version of Mark Clattenburg appointed as their referee's consultant, who comes out and defends the case and demands it. But it's not to be for them. And West Germany win an extraordinary World Cup performance, 3-2. But you're absolutely right. The suggestions of doping, nothing that emerged at the time at all. I don't think there was any talk of that at the time. But that is something that casts something of a shadow over this achievement, I guess.
Yeah, there's definitely some suspicion back then. And again, I've referenced it a couple of times, but Frank Puskas mentions it in his book, not in a bitter way. He just kind of questions that maybe there was some suggestion. I think there was some suggestion. So just for clarity, so you've got the West German team, you've got the doctor that's administering what he's called vitamin C. Studies have pretty much now suggested that was pervitin, which is a methamorphine. I think that's the right thing to say. I'm not a medical man. A drug that was administered to German soldiers during the Second World War and went under the rather cool name of Panzer Chocolate. And it was to keep German soldiers in aircraft and tanks awake and alert longer than they normally would be naturally. So I think it was basically the suggestion is it was speed. So it's a one of the first possibly known occurrences of where drugs have been introduced into sport as an enabler, as an enhancer, and potentially that did contribute to West Germany's win. But again, the evidence is quite light on that. There was a doping investigation done in 2010 by a university in Berlin, and they're pretty clear that the players were given the drug Pervitin.
Before we get onto the legacy, and I think we know what West Germany's legacy is because we've been on the wrong end of it numerous times in tournaments. But we should talk about just this World Cup, which, I mean, obviously, sadly, FIFA decided not to follow the same format. And yeah, that is a format which creates an extraordinary number of records, doesn't it? I mean, not just the highest average goals per game. My favourite one here, I mean, there's pretty much one for everyone, but my favourite is the most goals conceded, which South Korea can concede 16 in 2 games. I mean, that's really fair play for them being there, as you say, first tournament. But it is quite extraordinary, the number of records that are set in that tournament and still haven't been beaten.
I don't think they're ever going to be beaten. You may get the highest scoreline, I think, has been equaled since the Hungary when they beat South Korea. We know because we've covered Zaire, 1974, when Yugoslavia beat Zaire when they were on a bit of a protest mission. That's been equal. But the 12 goals between Austria and Switzerland, I can't imagine there's going to be a World Cup game in the future where there's 12 goals.
Interestingly, Kostic's 11-goal record is beaten at the next World Cup, isn't it? 13 goals by which does seem quite extraordinary.
Yeah, Just Fontaine, or as I like to call him, Just Fontaine, as a question rather than a name. He goes on and scores 13 goals 4 years later.
So impressive. So we're going to talk about the legacy. It has to be said, Hungary, this doesn't sort of spell curtains to their successful run. This must be an unbelievable frustration to this. So this is they go on, and I think they remain undefeated for another couple of years after this as well. Then
in 6 years, they play 62 games. They only lose 1 game. This is the 1 game, and then something a bit more serious happens in Hungary that changes the fortunes of the football team, and then the players disperse to various parts of Europe, as we'll find out when we cover the great Hungarians. But for Germany, the legacy is strong, and it's almost immediate. I mean, just to kind of give it some flavour in, there's in Germany, Herbert Zimmermann is the Kenneth Wolfenstein of English football commentary. He gets given the final, and he's just an excited football fan when he's commentating. It's absolutely brilliant. But some of the things that he's said during his commentary have become famous in Germany. When Rahm scores the 3rd goal, it's a goal for Germany. Germany lead 3-2. Call me crazy, call me mad. So his commentary, especially when they do score, because he just like a South American basically that goes goal. He's like Tor. But then I think his excitement is so much, there's this silence for about 8-9 seconds where he's not saying anything because he's catching his breath. He's realizing what's going on. You know, he's lost in the moment. He's not doing his job. He's just saying it as a football fan at that particular moment, which is fantastic as a football commentator. So Herbert Zimmermann is predates 1966 in terms of feigned commentary. But more crucially is this victory has been cited, and it's hard to measure this, I think, as the rebuild of what we now know as the new Germany. It gave the West Germans and also the East Germans, although not everyone was happy about this result, not just the Hungarians, there were a few other parts of Europe that weren't too happy about it. But what this did, this gave the West Germans belief again that they could feel proud of themselves, that they had something to feel good about. And after what they'd gone through as a nation and what they were going through out of the Second World War, West Germany or Germany wasn't seen as a great place. This gave the people in West Germany something to be proud of. And there is the idea that this is the moment that West Germany started to become the force in the world that it was to become.
And on the football field, they proceed to qualify for every World Cup that follows, which is not a bad legacy, one that not every successful World Cup winning country has achieved.
But not only qualify for every World Cup afterwards, up until 2018, where they famously went out in the group stage, in every single World Cup, and I think it's 14 editions after 1954, they qualify and reach the quarterfinals or better in every World Cup. It's astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing.
It really is an extraordinary run, and it's only difficult to track exactly how they have achieved because of the slightly bizarre format structures that FIFA invented that you can't always tell where the quarterfinal is. But it's an incredible run they go on, and it all stems from this. But I think that's what makes this story so extraordinary, is that this, and quite difficult to get your head around, that this is a time when West Germany were genuine underdogs. So we should probably think about what this means for their greatness in history. As a reminder, for anyone who doesn't know already, we have 5 categories of greatness. All-time greats right at the top, true greats, touch of greatness, below that edge of greatness, and then our prize category for the particularly special teams at the end, blink of greats. We do have a bonus category. I don't think we'll be needing that one today, I don't think. Where do you put this team?
I'm a little bit torn on this. I mean, I do love this story. This is a team that I've been wanting to talk about, as you know, Graham, for quite some time, because there's so much to this story that I love. I mean, it's a country that's rebuilding itself. And it's also one of the things I forgot to mention, actually, is that so when they're rebuilding after the Second World War, and there's no raw materials anywhere, poverty is pretty much a prime thing. The reason why, as I've learned, the reason why a lot of teams in the Bundesliga or the Bundesliga 2 play in red today is because their colours come from this particular period. Their club colours come from this particular period. Materials weren't available, but there was a lot of red flags lying around that people didn't have a lot of use for. So they upcycled the German Nazi swastika into kits, and that's why a lot of German football clubs have red on their kit, is because the people of Germany at the time, West Germany, were recycling these flags that nobody really had any cause to use any longer into football kits. So they were using the resources around them. So I kind of like the mentality there. It's a wonderful underdog story. Films have been a brilliant film. The Miracle of Bern has been made about this particular story, and it's a wonderful film. Books have been written about it. This team are managed and coached by, I think, an absolute genius in Sepp Herberger. They've got this incredible leader, Fritz Walter, whose brother, Ottmar Walter, who we haven't mentioned, also played in the World Cup final, the first brothers to ever appear in a World Cup final. So there's a lot of greatness in this that tells me they're all-time greats, but there are things about it. There's a Greece element to me, the Greece 2004 element. I feel Hungary not winning leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And I think people cite Hungary as the greatest football team never to have won, this Hungary team never to have won the World Cup. And then you've got the question mark over the vitamin C that's being administered to the players, and did it or didn't contribute. So I think I'd lose a mark or two on that. So I think, and I feel quite bad about this, but I'm going to start us off by putting them in the second tier, true greats.
True greats. Well, I'm a bit torn. I mean, it's an extraordinary story. Don't get me wrong; it is quite something. Army thinks they were a lucky team, and that's not a criticism, but in the way that Greece were, you just need some things to happen to you. Things just seem to fall for them. You could argue, if West, I suppose that group format they probably would have rightfully got out of that group. What I'm not sure, true greats feels, are there any true great spirit, but I don't think you can go as high as that, can you? I mean, It's very uncustomary to interrupt when you're doing this, but I just feel
on the luck thing, if it helps you. So Sepp Herberger is famous for making lots of quotes, and one of them was that football is one third skill, one third toughness, and one third luck. So he had already allowed the luck element into football, and I think luck favours the prepared, as I learnt from the film The Incredibles. A brilliant quote. He also, and you will like this may tip your scales, he's also credited with the phrase, "the ball is round." That comes from Sepp Herberger, apparently.
Well, that is highly impressive. Highly impressive. I think, do you know what? I think my problem with this team is why I don't see them as not as high as true great. I don't have any visual things to go on. I don't know. I think feels to me like touch of greatness feels about right on this one. Can they really go into true greats? It's a great romantic story, but I'm not having it. I'm saying their touch of greatness. So
The
West
last
Germany, 1954 World Cup winners, the great underdogs, edge, no touch of greatness. I nearly took them down in the last moment of the catch. Wouldn't be the first time somebody's been given the wrong category by mistake. If nothing else during this odyssey, we've managed to finally learn the categories. If nothing else, excellent. Well, Jamie, thank you as ever for your Guinness Book of World Record and general data analysis. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. I think there were lots of facts and figures in this one, and loads that I haven't even shared that will just take up space in my notebook now and never be seen by anyone ever again.
Or just tap into the grid at of some kind, or Total Network Solutions.
Oh, do you know what? We talked about nicknames for Total Network Solutions.
Oh, yes.
And I couldn't help but try to come up with some. And it was a really pathetic attempt, to be honest. I couldn't really come up with anything. The best I had was Data Dominators was the best nickname I had for the New Saints, or TNS, which is their official. The Saints is their official nickname. But the best I come up was Data Dominators, which was one step better than Router Rulers.
Router Rulers are quite like I'm not having the Saints as you. I mean, I appreciate there's a reason why this has happened, and it's because they used to be called Total Network Solutions. So they actually used their nickname to come up with quite a good name. You can't have a nickname which is essentially your team name, only missing one word out. It'd be like saying West Bromwich Albion's nickname was West Albion. It's like madness. I'm not having that. Can't have that. Data Dominators feels more. There's a hint of gladiators around it more than nicknames, but I'm liking that. I'm liking that. Excellent. Well, you can find out. Of course, you can listen to our Total Network Solutions special and all our previous podcasts, which are available in our podcast feed, and you can see much more details, including team sheets and starting team sheets for all our teams that we've looked at over the years, and our slightly random, eclectic rankings that we've given them, and you can find those at our website, thegreatesteam.co. And as a reminder, do please subscribe, tell your friends about the podcast. Hopefully I'll have a proper voice again by the time we do this next time, and we shall speak again soon.